Oh, you're recording.
I'm recording, Doug Peters, because this is the MSUM Dragons Podcast. I'm fired up to be here. How about you?
Hey, I'm always fired up to get to talk about Dragon Athletics, Webby.
That's for sure. The More Than a Game podcast, the MSUM Dragons Podcast. There's a lot of strategic anchors that we have in Dragon Athletics, and one of them is being a part of something bigger than ourselves. And as the recent headlines and news from the university has happened, the part of the university that's big right now is the budget. And another thing that was pretty big was your picture on the Forum Sports page today.
Right?
So why don't you tell us why that happened and a little bit more about the budget situation for Dragon Athletics?
Right. You never, as an athletic director, at least in my world, I never want to have my picture in the paper because it means something not necessarily so good is happening or going on within Dragon Athletics. And I've been fortunate that my picture has not been in the paper very much over the last decade. So that part's really good. But our headline in the forum this morning was, we decided that cutting a sport wasn't the best option. And that's a result of a process we've been going through as a university. Got some budget challenges. One of the things I think we do really well at MSUM is our budget process. So we're working on our 2022 budget process, which is 2 years out. We've been working on it since the start of the fall semester. And as we've worked our way through that process, we projected a $6 million budget gap in 2022. So then our focus has been on how do we close that budget gap moving forward. And that's what the headlines in the media have been about yesterday and today, as President Blackhurst announced in a town hall meeting what our plan, our proposed plan to close that budget gap is, and what some of the specific steps that we're going to take to close that gap.
And I think a big piece of that is that $6 million number. It's more than just someone coming in and writing a $6 million check. This is something that has a little bit more of a long-term piece to it. Could you just talk a little bit about, it's more than just getting to that $6 million number. It's a little bit more about a future plan to be sustainable as a university.
Right. So you look at that $6 million amount. It's a significant amount. To give you some context, it's about 10% of our university budget. And that's not a small number by any means. And as you look at it, if we look across the world that we live in, pre-COVID-19, we talk about that a little bit later, but we look at right now, every industry is going through significant change. You think about what retail is going through with online buying. You look how grocery stores have had to adapt with delivery. I was talking with Jason Sobolik, our compliance coordinator, and we were talking about how 7 years ago we would put the DVD player in the DVD for our kids to watch. Now we just pull out the device and they stream it live. Industries across the board have gone through massive changes in how they operate, what our customers, what our consumers are looking for, and higher education is in that same place. With the growth in online education, with the growth in just how education is being consumed, we have to change a little bit too. So there is this budget gap, and there's also this part about how, as a university, do we need to organize ourselves so that we can thrive in the future and really meet the needs of our customers, which are the students that are looking for that higher education experience. And how can we meet the regional workforce need as well? So how do we meet the needs of those customers coming in and help them have that transformative experience of higher education so that then they can go out into our community and take our community to the next level?
Yeah, because you might not even know this about me. So I'll share something a little, not that anybody cares about my opinion today, but growing up, I'm from Huron, South Dakota, and there was a school called Huron College, which my dad was a coach. Became Huron University, which my mom was the dean of admissions, and they got into a $5 million budget deficit when they sold and became Huron University Satanka. And eventually that university closed because they never shifted and moved fast enough. And both of my parents lost their jobs. And it's a sad thing that unfortunately happens. And I do not want to see that happen at MSUM. And hopefully these changes, hard as they are, will keep MSUM that piece of our community that fills the workforce and for our students in the future, just from my point of view of having to go through that when I was a little bit younger. But you talked about a lot of local businesses right there, and a lot of them are our sponsors and people who support us, and making sure that, please go and check out all of our sponsors at MSUMDragons.com, and please help the people who support us in this process as well. So let's go back a little bit and talk a little bit about those decisions and numbers you mentioned that helped get to this place in the budget proposal.
Yeah, throughout the process, we knew we had a gap, and there's 9 divisions at MSUM when you look at it of how we're organized, and President Blackhurst assigned us all a budget target. And so at the beginning of the process, we were all looking at about a 10% across the board budget target. And then we went back to our divisions, and each of us were tasked with coming up with what we thought our best recommendation was about how to meet that budget target. Brought all of those pieces back into the presidential cabinet, presented them, talked about them, worked our way through it, and tried to figure out, okay, what are the best options for Minnesota State University Moorhead and its students and our community moving forward. And I'll tell you what, some of the things that we talked about, are things you never want to have to talk about. You never want to have to talk about eliminating parts of your community, and that's where we got to. We knew that we couldn't keep doing what we've been doing and still continue to have a balanced budget. And as we got into some of those harder decisions, athletics obviously was a conversation point, and we talked about a little bit of everything regarding athletics and how athletics fits into the institution, how athletics doesn't fit into the institution, what the good things it brings to the table are, what the bad things it brings to the table are, and then to put that into the context with all of the other conversations that we were having. And ultimately, we decided that cutting a sport was not our best option. I'm very proud to say that our student athletes, on average, we have a higher GPA than the general student body. We have a higher graduation rate than the general student body. I think the things that student athletes bring to our campus community, I think they're valuable. I think they're different than the other areas bring to the table as well. And I think there is definitely a role for college athletics at Minnesota State University Moorhead and what that picture looks like. As we move forward, no, we're not eliminating any sports, but we do have some budget reductions that are a little bit challenging, and not 100% sure how those decisions are going to play out and what exactly they're going to look like. We know we won't be filling a vacant administrative position, and we know that we won't have the exact same operating budgets that we've had in the past moving forward. And I think those are some adjustments we can make. I'm a fan of Napoleon Hill, for any of you that are familiar with him. And a line out of his most famous book is that crisis is innovation's best friend. So as I think about us in athletics being forced to do business differently because we have a different set of resources, it's hopefully going to lead us into a place where we can have some innovation, do things a little bit differently that are going to help our student athletes have the experience we want them to have. So there are multiple ways to and lenses to look at a budget challenge through, and I've tried to choose the positive side of it as much as we possibly can. Mm-hmm. At the same time of it, there is a grieving process, because we're not the same institution going forward that we were 5 or 10 years ago, and we are not going to do some things, and we are not going to have the exact same people, and losing colleagues that I respect and trust and enjoy being around, and knowing that they won't be with us. There is a grieving process that goes along with that as well, Webby.
And I can't agree with you more. It is a hard time, and we're not alone, I think, is another thing to touch on today. This is something that is going across colleges and college athletics all over the country. We've even just within our league have seen sports being dropped. What is the scale of this budgetary situation in higher education? And what do we know when cutting a program, and these kind of cuts are presented within athletics.
Well, we know we don't like to think about them, that's for sure.
Yep.
But as we are looking at reality and taking the responsibility that we have as leaders to make sure that we are viable and that we are operating and being good stewards of the resources that we have, to give some context, Dragon Athletics overall budget, when everything is added together, is about 6.8, 6.9 million. So we're looking at about a $250,000 reduction out of that. You look at it and you go, okay, it's not a huge amount. At the same side of things, I think we operate very efficiently, and there's not a lot of things that you can just easily go, oh, you know what, I can do without that. I think for us, it's looking at it and going, okay, we have to do business differently now. And as we do business differently, we want to make sure that we don't lose some of the things that we have worked very hard to accomplish. I take great pride in the work our team has done as our coaches and our administrative staff, as our academic success rate. It's an all-time high. That part is awesome when you're setting records for the academic success of your student athletes. I think the success of our athletic programs is a positive as well when we look at where football is at today versus where it was in 2010. Same thing across the board with our basketball teams, our tennis teams. I got Chris Cook and Nadir, Muhammad, and Shai Kemp on my mind, just from their competition at the national level, Braden Nordloff as well. So when I think about the accomplishments of our athletic department, both in the field of competition and in the academic side, and then just knowing what they've done in the community as well, in the service and the volunteer hours that they spend, and where I see them engaged when they're not competing, it's you don't want to go backwards. There's no doubt about that. And so then you wake up even more fired up, so to speak, or hungry to go, okay, how do we innovate? How do we meet this challenge head on? It's just like a game. You're in a game. I don't care what the sport. It's not going your way. You just don't get to quit and walk away. You take a time out. You try and make some adjustments. You try and do things a little bit differently, and you try and make things go better, make things be more efficient. And that's the place where Dragon Athletics is at right now, because we are sports and athletics. So I'll just use the sports analogy. We're in the game. Some things happen that we didn't necessarily want to happen that are out of our control. How are we going to best adapt and innovate in the environment that we're in right now?
And the proposal that happened, the budget cut proposal that we're discussing, there's a lot of fluidity left in it when we look at the future. And as you mentioned, COVID-19 and how that will continue to impact the world we all live in, for everybody in the future. How is that going to kind of play in with the combination of this reduction within athletics in our future?
Hey, can you get out the magic 8-ball so I can shake it and find an answer, Webby? I know I say that kind of kiddingly, but we don't know. So one thing I do know is I just want to clarify something you had just shared a minute ago. As we unveiled our budget proposal, MSUM is part of the Minnesota state system. We are a collective bargaining agreement organization. And so we have a fairly strict process to go through that allows for feedback and meeting and conferring about different proposals in different places. And so that's where the term proposal comes into play. Of what President Blackhurst presented yesterday was the budget proposal to close the $6 million gap. And we're in a process now of gaining feedback, taking things into consideration before final decisions are made. Another thing that just layers on top of that, it's almost a little bit of a perfect storm, is COVID-19 and the pandemic we're in. Many of us, first of all, I hope you and your family are safe listening to this. I would say my shout out as far as respect to Coach Peterson's family, longtime involvement in Dragon baseball and Dragon Club baseball, and passed away yesterday from COVID-19 and complications from COVID-19. This is something that is impacting everybody in the world right now. And sometimes the impact is a little bit more, sometimes it's a little bit less. And so you think about it is a life and death situation for many people. And some of the byproducts of the pandemic are what's happening within our economy, what's happening from a financial standpoint, and how do you plan for that, and how do you operate within that moving forward. Most people know that athletics, sports at all levels have just been canceled right now. And throughout the spring, I do know, and I have every confidence that athletics will be back and we will be competing again. What I don't know is when. I also don't know what some of the impact from some of the revenue streams that we have are going to be. Things that we count on, like sponsorships, is a big part, where people advertise and pay us, and some of the trade out pieces are extremely valuable to our athletic department. To some of the special events that we do. Right now, our golf tournaments are up in the air. We're confident right now that we are not going to have the Dragon Open here in the beginning of June. And what is the impact on our camps? All of our sports programs run camps. It create a pretty significant amount of revenue that supplements their budgets for their operations for the year. So we're not sure when we'll be back in the camp setting. There are those questions, and there's also a lot of people that charitably give because they believe in MSUM and in Dragon Athletics and the transformative experience that we offer our student athletes, and they want to support that. And so they give charitably to that. How are all those things and those revenue streams going to be impacted, and how do we operate and manage within that? The bright spot, if you can even say that in this sort of situation, is that it's not just MSUM, it is every university, every college athletic department across the country are running into these questions, and none of us know and what are the right steps to take. And it's the time and place where I just need to remind myself to take a deep breath and remember that I can only control what I can control. And right now what I can control is staying at home and social distancing, and trying to stay connected with people and stay connected with our student athletes as we try and make our way through this really unprecedented in our generation's time event.
Yeah.
How's that for a long-winded answer, Webby?
But I mean, it did the question justice, because it's not a simple answer of how this is all going to play out within an unprecedented time within the university, an unprecedented time within society and the world as a whole. And you mentioned one very strong word there, and appreciation. Appreciating the people on the front lines of all of this, the nurses, doctors, first responders, everybody who's keeping us all together and functioning. And I'll even go another step further. The Dragons on the front lines of this situation, is we see lots of nurses, doctors. We see educators finding unique ways to educate. A lot of different programs that we've offered here. A lot of student athletes are on the front line, and follow Kyle Bowlesby, and he's talking about his dad meeting with the vice president and Bob Bowlesby, who's a wrestling alum of ours. And so you see, just appreciate those people on the front line and the Dragons on the front line.
You're absolutely
pretty incredible.
Yep, you're absolutely right on that, Webby. And I think that's one thing that's true about Dragon Athletics throughout all the years. Is we all recognize we're part of something bigger than ourselves. And this is definitely that situation right now. It's our opportunity to demonstrate that. And you know what, maybe our best role is to make sure that we stay home and do our social distancing so we can try and flatten the curve as we move through it. Maybe somebody's skill is in the medical field. Maybe somebody else is performing that critical job, like keeping our grocery stores running. Just thinking about all of the different parts that go together. It is a collection of people that recognize they are part of something bigger than themselves, and we've all got to work together to get through this. And
let's all do our part, and let's all show appreciation for those going above and beyond. And I appreciate you being on our podcast today. I know, it's a difficult time for everybody right now, and I know you've had a lot of meetings in a row and being there for a lot of different people. So thank you for the time today, and of course, go Dragons.
You bet, Webby. And if anybody has any questions or wants to know anything more about the budget, you can certainly find my email address at msumdragons.com. Don't hesitate to reach out.
All right. Thanks, Doug.
You bet, Webby.